Hey, I'm Christa.
Hey, I'm Micah.
Welcome to Bad People.
With good stories.
This is a podcast that seeks to challenge black and white thinking
by exploring the gray.
Yes, and we have our guest, Shannon, who's the founder of Modern Hustle. Welcome here. Thank you so much for coming all the way from the island. You have two kids. You've been married for how long now?
It'll be 9 years next month.
And how old are your kids again?
5 years old and 8.
5 and 8. Wow. Yeah, we reconnected through a friend. It's interesting because we were just chatting this morning a bit and reflecting on how in my past context and life, I would have been kind of hesitant interacting with you and engaging. And I've said this to her a few times. So this isn't offensive. For some people, find this word to be offensive. Shannon was like a witchy friend. Like it was a vibe that I was like, oh yeah, in my former Christian context, I would have been guarded around you. And my felt experience with you was very different. It was so nice that I got to meet somebody who was open to my story and who wanted to share your own story. And so thank you again for those interactions and kind of like being that safe, witchy person to interact with, to kind of break me free from like my black and white thinking and again, showing me something different. So yeah, welcome here.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
All right. So I just did a bunch of talking. Why don't you tell us a bit about, your origins and your starting points and kind of your background.
I grew up in the church. My parents got split when I was 1.5. And so I've never known my parents together, but I do have a relationship with both and it's beautiful in its own ways. And I remember going to church when I was 5, like definitely every Sunday was Sunday school. And then I just, you grow up that way. And there's a point in life where I fell out of it and I discovered who I am and who I want to be in this world. And everything that's led me to where I am today has been a beautiful process. It hasn't been easy, but it's been a beautiful process to allow me to do the work that I do today.
Now I actually don't know this. Did you grow up like going to Christian school?
No,
you weren't. Okay, so public school, but at like a local church we won't name, but like a pretty predominantly well-known, local church, big congregation, right?
Yes, I started going there when I was about 15.
Okay.
I left the church that I was going to with my mom, decided to go to my own church.
I love that.
Yeah.
And more because you were drawn, I know that youth group was quite large and fun and glamorous, perhaps. Like, was that why you were drawn there? Do you remember why?
I think I was drawn there, if I can remember, because I'm really having to dig out the archives right now.
Some history.
There was a point in my life where I got in trouble. And I say in air quotes, rebellious, because in my head I wasn't like, today I'm looking back, I'm like, I was just trying to discover who I am, really. And what that was, I was in grade 9 and I started smoking weed. In grade 9, everybody was like drinking or smoking weed. And I tried drinking a couple times. It just didn't excite me. And I was like, oh, but this weed thing is kind of cool. So let's do that. And so I did that. And then I started making my own bongs and pipes. And my mom found one in my coat pocket. And that was a big turning point for me because I got in a lot of trouble. And I had to write her a promise letter. And I don't even know what was on that letter, to be honest, but I just had to write a whole bunch of promises to her. I wonder if she still has it.
Yeah, that'd be cute. That'd be interesting to dig that up.
And then it was at that point I was like, I have to change everything because my mom is so mad at me, right? And that's when I decided to switch churches and go to this one. And I had known some people from high school that went to this church. And so it was just familiarity, I guess, going there. And then, of course, there was like the fun church and, there's always cute boys and whatever.
Yeah, and then maybe this is something that can replace, like, your true nature was to kind of explore with drugs and, find your own path. And when you weren't safe to do that, and clearly there's a reaction to kind of your truth, and you're like, okay, how do we substitute maybe some of that freer vibes? And then, yeah, of course, boys and the fun stuff that's going on at the church is a great distraction, or even a good kind of even like bypass or equal thing to potentially what you were looking for. And so I'm sure that kind of was a great Band-Aid for a while.
It was.
Yeah. And it was the right thing to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And I ended up going to 5 a.m. prayer. I would do that before school sometimes. Like I went deep, and I'd go to church. So that, and then I would go on like Friday nights for youth group or whatever they had. And then Sundays, mornings, sometimes even Sunday night.
Fire and freedom.
Yeah, there we go.
Now we outed it. Thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just went really hardcore, and I stopped hanging out with the friends that I hung out with, and I got made fun of in the hallways at school. It was awful. But I somehow just stood in my truth at the time. And it was, looking back, it's quite interesting of how strong that I was at that time in my life, of being like, sorry, I'm not hanging out with you anymore. Oh, now these people are making fun of me in the hallway. That's cool, whatever. I'll just continue on and do my thing. And eventually it stopped and whatnot. But yeah, just quite an interesting transition.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I'm curious, in that stage of your life, do you remember having any, because I mean, it's one thing to go to church for, all those reasons, and it's fun. I remember that feeling too, of somewhere to be, something to be a part of. And but do you feel like you had any kind of spiritual experiences during that time, or anything you were experiencing on a spiritual level that kind of, I don't know, contributed to that strength maybe of being able to just be like, this is what I'm doing? Or was there a draw spiritually for you beyond all the kind of surface stuff?
I never really thought about that, but looking back, I'm thinking at 5 a.m. prayer that I did feel a connection spiritually. What that was, I don't know, because I was also that person, I'm an Aquarius. Aquariuses don't like to be put in a box, don't give me rules, and definitely don't tell me what to do. I'm that person through and through. Doesn't mean that I'm not open to other people and whatever, but I had a lot of questions of what the Bible tells you and what the church preaches to you and all of that nobody really had full answers for me. So I always had questions, but what I did know was that tiny little experience of connection that I had, even though I didn't really understand really what that was. And then also, because this type of church, it was Pentecostal. So it's very
expressive.
Very expressive. Yes. And then people talking in tongues. I'm like, what the fuck is this? What is tongues? What kind of shit are you making up right now? Yeah, I don't know. And now, in the community that I'm in, there's this thing called light. What's it called? Light talking, or I can't remember.
Oh, interesting.
But it reminds me of speaking in tongues, and I'm still trying to process that one in my brain. Right, light language. That's what it's called. Yeah, and I'm just like, huh? What? Where's this coming from? But I'm also somebody in general that I like to understand things before I move forward. And it's just out of curiosity. It's not because I'm trying to be rebellious. I'm just trying to understand so that I can do it authentically.
Totally.
So I remember trying to speak in tongues at one point, and I was just like, I'm literally just talking gibberish right now, so I should just stop.
Yeah. Me too. I had the similar where, because in our church they encouraged us to sometimes just start and say anything So in my mind, I'm like, well, is it me then, or is it it's an interesting thing to go through.
Kind of traumatic.
A little traumatic.
I did not have that same no, but a Baptist or they don't. It's not a thing. So I never felt the pressure. But how crazy, because it's supposed to be a marker of if you have the Holy Spirit inside you.
There's this added pressure.
Which then you're trying to fabricate something that is actually not genuine. Oh gosh, and you give it a try.
Yeah,
tricky. Oh my. Oh, well, thanks for sharing like those beginning moments. And then, because, yeah, you also said that you went to YWAM. So, yeah, so from like church, it was sort of like that's like the next graduating program kind of idea.
Yeah. So I was graduating high school and, the pressure of like, oh, what are you going to do now? And I was always that person. I would apply to college and whatever. And I always got accepted. But then I never followed through because I was like, I don't know what I want to do. So
It's hard to know at that age. Yeah, and there's so much pressure to know, but
42 and I feel like I'm just figuring it out.
Well, she shared a great quote where like everything up till you're 40 is just like learning. And then life starts at 40, which I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
yeah, I liked that.
Yeah. And so I remember at the time, my friend, she was going to YWAM in Denver and it was a snowboarding one. I was like, oh, that looks so fun. I was like, I'm a snowboarder, but I like sunshine. So let's go to Hawaii. So I signed up for YWAM in Hawaii and I did my discipleship training school. And I did that for 6 months. And you do 3 months in Maui and then 3 months overseas. And so where I got assigned was to do missionary work was we started in Hong Kong and then we traveled throughout China, south of China. We moved every 10 days. And then we landed in Tibet, which was so cool. And who I am today, I would die to go back to Tibet. Yeah, back in those days, it was not my jam. But I also had, I'll just say it's a little bit of a rebellious spirit, but it's only because I was like, I didn't like missionary work. I hated it. Like every Thursday night was go out into the town and you're assigned where to go and you have to go and basically convert people to accept Jesus into their hearts and repent for all their sins. And that never sat right with me. I was like, this is awkward. I'm walking up to someone randomly right now and I'm like, hey, do you know Jesus or whatever, like awkward.
Just the ultimate sales pitch, right? Like you feel like you have to be good at sales to sell this.
Plus, like, you're basically telling them that they don't know anything about, like, this is the way. Like, you're kind of judging the person and going, like, you don't know how to live your life. Like, here, I do.
Yeah.
I don't know you. We're like,
I'm also 18.
I never right. How much life experience do you, really have yet?
and like, again, as you're like experiencing like how awkward that is, but yet kind of gaslighting yourself to go, no, this is what I have to do. Like, that's also a wild experience because that gut feeling of being like, this is awkward and so not okay. Probably we should have all listened to that and gone like, let's just stay home.
I wish I could have stayed home.
Yeah, it's tricky when like spiritual weight is put behind that and it's, so much more intense than, just.
I remember there was a point in YWAM in the schooling part where what's it called? It was rebuking or...
Oh, rebuking spirit.
So there was that sort of thing in the DTS.
Yeah.
And I remember it coming up about my parents splitting. And that was a trauma that I was supposed to face. And I was like, okay, like, what's this? And then my leader was like, well, you need to confront your dad about it. And I was like, what? How do I confront my dad about this? Like, I'm like, my half of my family doesn't realize who I am because I just became a mute as a child, basically. Because it just never felt safe to be me, speak up. Because the times that I did, I got in trouble. And it was just awful. So anyways, I did it because that's what I was encouraged to do. And I confronted my dad and I emailed him from China. I remember sitting in the cafe, the internet cafe, writing my dad an email and asking him, did you cheat on my mom?
Wow.
I was like thinking back now, I'm like, who am I to do that? Like, that is so offside. And so like, I wish I could take it back. But my dad handled it so good. Like, he was just like, from what I remember, because I can't even get into that email anymore, but what I can remember, he obviously bypassed it, but in a way where it was like, this isn't a conversation to have with you sort of thing. And again, those weren't his exact words, but along those lines. And totally get it. Totally respect your your response for sure, because you're right. Like, that's not my place. And it doesn't matter at the end of the day. For me, that was your relationship. That's like, I'm the byproduct of that relationship. But anyways, so that was a big thing to move through. But then, yeah, just like the evangelism part never felt good to me. And I remember I would try to make excuses to not go and things like that. But yeah.
I'm sorry, that's hard, like, to be encouraged to do something that, again, didn't come within you, right? Like, whether it's the even evangelizing, like selling Jesus, or even confronting your dad, like both of those.
Something so personal.
Yeah, right. And that's hard, being told that this is like the good thing to do and the right thing to do, and yet it wasn't genuinely from within you. So I'm sorry, that sucks. And we've definitely been there. And again, thank you for sharing, because I think that's like, even again in our previous chats, you're just sort of saying like your experience with YWAM, you came out of that and you were like, I don't know that I believe in God. Like, and that, do you want to kind of like walk us through how that, what that looked like for you?
Yeah. So like after Maui, I ended up coming back home, working for 6 months, 2 jobs, so I could save money and like go back to YWAM, because that's all my eyes were on. And so I did that. And then I went to YWAM and I chose to go on staff because that's what God told me.
Do you think that was true? Do you think that he told you that?
I don't know how to answer that.
Think back to moments too where I'm like, I clearly thought I heard God's voice, and now, that's a funny, good for you for responding like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a whole other, like, the word God to unravel as well. So that's why I'm like, I don't know how to answer that one. Maybe one day I'll come back.
Yeah, great answer.
Yeah, so then I came back, I saved my money, and then I chose to go to Perth to go on staff because it was Australia. That sounds like a fantastic place to go.
Another sunny place. Yes.
I am biased.
And so I worked as a staff member at that base, and I committed to 1 year. And then after 1 year, I was like, I'm going to stay longer. And so I signed on. I can't remember if it was 1 more year or 2 more years. I can't fully remember. And that's what I did. And I went on staff, and that's when everything started to unravel for me. And there's rules for those of you that don't know YWAM, there's rules. Like, you cannot date somebody without asking permission from your leader. And then that leader has to go to the main base leader. And then they have to approve if this relationship, I guess, is worthy enough. And if you guys are ready to be in a relationship, all of that. I never dated anybody on YWAM because I looked at that and I was like, this is awkward. Like, so many hoops. And then, you also aren't allowed to hang out with one-on-one with a boy, the opposite gender. You're not allowed to do that. And if you need to walk home at night, you have to have, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 guys with you just to walk you home. And so there's all these rules. And there was one guy who came to the base in YWAM for school. It was for staff. And we just became really friends. I grew up in Langley. He grew up in Langley. We didn't know each other from Langley, but we just bonded over that alone. Like, you're on the side of the country, or the world, I mean. Like, you want to, you find things that are familiar and comfortable, right? And he was that. And we were always friends, strictly friends. Even moving back home to Canada, we were still just friends, like never anything above that. And anyways, I started getting in trouble for hanging out with him in their eyes too much. And I was just getting so angry, and I started to avoid him. And then he noticed I starting to avoid him, and he asked me, like, what is up? And so I told him, and he got super angry. And then that's when I really started to question a lot of, like, what am I doing? Like, there's something seriously wrong here, and I need to get the fuck out. And so I played by their cards, and I played the system, I'll call it. And I went to my leader and I was like, I need to leave. I need to break my contract. God is telling me I need to go home and go to school. God did not tell me to do any of that. Okay. It was me just being like, I got to go. I need to get out of here. And
Good for you.
thank you. And so that's what I did. And then you, of course, have to stand up in front of the whole base, and you have to announce everything. Even if you date somebody, when you break up with somebody, when you are leaving. Everything is public. It's so weird. And so I announced I was leaving, and then, they're like, "Oh, do you have support at home? Do you have a church to go to?" Yeah, I do. I got all that. And nobody follows up with you. I also had none of that at home. I didn't have a church I was going back to. In fact, I didn't even want to go back to church. I was like, there's too many questions I have, in my experience that I just had over the past 3 years, basically, just is so off-putting that I need to figure out what I even believe, because it was a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's like it finally landed. Like you finally felt it in your body, like something is deeply wrong. And all of that, like, no, it's fine, is so not fine. And then I hate that you had to be brought to like lying about it, because that's, I think, something that's hard when your truth is, and you're trying to speak up and you're trying to go like, I'm not okay. This is weird. Like, I now have to stop being friends with somebody that I care deeply about, or whatever that was. And then you're sort of forced into this place of like, I got to get out, and now I'm lying about it. I got to stand in front of all these people and effectively possibly be judged, or whatever that experience is. Like, that's hard. So yeah, I'm again, sorry. And just, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's true. The lying part is an interesting one, because I don't like to lie, but I also didn't like how much control they had over me. Like, my mom came to visit me for a month, and every Friday night was Friday night church where the public could come. And I asked for the night off because my mom was visiting, and they denied me going. I had to go on Friday night. I was like, oh my God, like, that's wrong in itself. Like, my mom's visiting here, and you're not letting me take one night off where I'm in basically church every single day. Yeah.
Look at that though. Like, that's, you're right. Like, that is wrong. And you, again, are feeling it. And it's weird because it's like you have to, then you feel like you're fleeing this thing where you got to just find some way to get out. Because again, you saying like, no, I need to leave just because I need to leave, not because God told me to or whatever else. You knew that that wasn't going to be received, right? Yeah. And that the way you are interacting with this thing, like, it's not because you have a demon or because like you're bad. It's just, no, I just actually don't feel good in this context. And I'm not wrong because I don't. Like, we had an interesting experience, or I had an interesting experience sitting in church the other day and going like, I don't feel good in this body right now. And normally I've been conditioned to go, I'm the problem, instead of going, maybe this is the problem. And then I think that is something that we're so distrustful of, right? Like, there's almost no place to kind of vocalize and say, I don't know that I'm not the problem. Like, something is really wrong, and nobody kind of wants to hear it, or it really breaks down the system versus, just the person that's really suffering. So,
yeah, because basically you're being taught to not trust yourself. And I'm not about that.
Yeah. So it seems like that realization kind of landed pretty quickly for you, or you were able to act on it at least kind of relatively quickly. And then just how did life kind of develop from there? Like, after you, I guess, went back home.
Yeah, so I came back home, and I do remember going to church a couple times, and I just couldn't connect, like, just with people in the room. I just couldn't connect. And I was like, why try and force something, So let's just not go. And then, of course, that started a whole snowball thing with my mom, and if not understanding why I wasn't going to church anymore. I just came back from this like amazing youth with a mission experience and doing all these amazing things in other countries. Like, I traveled to India, and I traveled to Greece. Like, I did all these amazing things. Obviously, it was all outreach and all evangelism work. But she also didn't understand where I was coming from, or what went on, because she wasn't curious. There was no questions being asked. So it wasn't until probably the past, I don't know, maybe over the past 8 years-ish or so, that I've been more vocal about what went on over there. And it was interesting because during, I think it was 2020, I got this Facebook invite from somebody, and it was an ex-YWAMers Facebook group. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Except,
Tell me more.
and I went in, and there was a lot of women in there that I had shared a house with. And I was like, oh, this is interesting, seeing their true colors now, and not true colors in a bad way, but just like authenticity. And there's a whole bunch of other people in there as well, sharing different stories that they had and their experiences that they had and the trauma that they experienced and endured. And like, it was disgusting. It's so heartbreaking at what these people had to undergo, all in the name of the church and of God. And like,
And having to hold it on their own, possibly, right? Like secrets and just like suffering in silence and never being allowed to go, this is what's really going on.
because when they did, they got backlash for it. And they were told, you can't talk about this. You can't share this information. And you still have to go and do your outreach because this is what we're here to do. You can't take time off because of what experience you just had and the trauma that you've experienced. They don't even I don't think they know the word trauma, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, that was interesting. And then that really started to make me dive back more into what I had experienced and then what I believe today and what I follow today, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what helped you kind of like, what were some of the dots, I think, that you started to like put together to kind of get to where you are now and how you see the world now and even spirituality? Like, yeah, how is that kind of, did that impact where you are now at all? Either positively or negatively? Like, sounds like negatively mostly, but how did that, I guess what I'm trying to say is how did that move you in the direction like that you now have kind of landed in the place that you're in?
Yeah. And just to add to that, because you would have gone from being a believer, like in God, right? And then you then went to the atheist view. So can you connect that from how you went from that to like, I don't know if there is a God, and then now to the place where, what does that look like for you? Like, is there a divine power? Is there not? Yeah. So if you did walk us through that a little.
Yeah. So I would say just up until even this year in January, I didn't like using the word God.
Yeah.
Because in the spiritual community, we'll just call it New Age spirituality. People refer to God, they refer to universe, source, energy, all of that. And I couldn't sit with the word God, for example. The universe made sense to me because we are part of a universe. And it didn't sit well with me to say God instead, because God to me, my head was this big man that is invisible in the sky that is connected to Jesus, and then whatever the Holy Spirit means.
Was there a rejection of that based on the hurt, like the harm that you'd faced, or because like, what was that piece where you're like, God didn't make sense? Because at a certain point, God would have made sense to you. Oh, never.
It never made sense to me. I never understood, why are we praying to God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit and it's the same thing? It didn't make sense in my brain, and nobody could ever answer that for me. So I was like, this is weird. Like, physically, Jesus was a person, and I still believe that. But I don't understand the whole, like, why are we praying to God that is the same as Jesus? Like, it just...
Okay. So a lot to wrap your head.
Yeah, like, I will say I don't even understand it now. But what I believe now is that everything is energy, scientific fact, and that God is energy. So God is the source of it all. So I don't believe that God is an invisible man in the sky and all of that, but I believe in God energy. And that came to light for me in this January when I was in an ayahuasca ceremony. I went to a ceremony for a weekend, and I had visuals happen I had like visual of Jesus, and then I had visual of the devil. And it was like just coming in and out of my mind's eye, but it was real because I was consumed ayahuasca. And it was like, but it wasn't scary. It was just showing me the polarities of it. And it made me just come to peace with the word God. And like, God is in me. God is love. That's what God is. It's not this invisible man in the sky that's controlling the world. And that God is in me.
Yeah.
And that's how I've come to that.
Would you also say that God is in me and in, like, it's not like we're to worship you.
No.
God is within us all, correct?
Yeah. Can you just explain for our listeners too, and me, because I'm curious what an ayahuasca ceremony is? Like, what does that entail?
Yeah. So it's nothing to take lightly, that's for sure. It's a very big ceremony because ayahuasca is a plant from the Amazon, I believe. And when you are in that type of ceremony, you have a shaman there. And so somebody that's like been practicing it for years. And
a shaman is?
You know what? I believe Jesus was a shaman, a healer, somebody that is so divinely connected to God, to source, to
like a guide of sorts, or different than that kind of understanding? Like a shaman being a guide?
Yeah, they're definitely a guide, a teacher, a healer. Yeah. And that's why I fully believe Jesus was a shaman. And yeah, so you're in a ceremony with them, and ayahuasca is it's a drink. It's a liquid that you drink, and the shaman will serve you a bit, and it all depends. Like, it's like a Dixie cup that we were given, and then depends how full that they give it to you. It can be a woman shaman or a man shaman. And you consume it. You're all sitting in the dark, and then about 45 minutes later, it will start to kick in.
Yeah, so it's like a psychedelic of, yeah.
And people will experience it in so many different ways. And we always say ayahuasca will call you. You don't call it, because it is really, really big work that this plant medicine will bring you through, and it will show you layers of you that you may not remember. It may show you layers that you don't want to face. However, when you are called into ayahuasca, like, you're drawn to it, it's because you're ready to do some big work.
Yeah, so that sounds like quite a big, like, revelation, I guess, of that sort of changed your view of God. And yeah, how's that, like, impacted you since then? And how do you kind of, I don't know, embody that?
Yeah, that experience of that ayahuasca ceremony for me was pretty huge, and it brought up a lot. It literally took me through my whole life. So it started me off when I was 5 years old, and then it took me into when I was 11, and that's again when another big event happened in my life, and then took me into when was it? My late 20s, or sorry, late teens going into my 20s. And then it took me all the way into motherhood, and it showed me like the process. And I went through every emotion. I went through immense joy. Like, I literally could not stop laughing. And then it took me into immense grief, and it was like grieving. Honestly, I was grieving my mom, but my mom's alive. So it was very weird to experience, but it was grieving that time in my life when I was 11, when she got remarried, and she hadn't been married before because it was just me and her growing up. So it took me through that process of remembering on her wedding day and how I felt. Like, I literally went and found a corner and cried in the corner the day my mom got married. And this medicine showed me why. And it was so fascinating because it was a remembering, and that's all plant medicine will generally do, is reminds you of who you are and what is within. And it reminded me how I've always been intuitive. I've always been so connected, but there was a point when I shut it off. And that moment my mom got remarried, my intuition was screaming at me, but I had no control over the outcome. And so fast forward to where we are today, she's not married to that man anymore. I knew it wasn't the right thing. So yeah, I feel like that experience, it allowed me to drop deeper into my knowing, into my intuition and trusting myself. That's a huge part. You can't know your intuition unless you trust yourself. If you don't trust yourself, how do you make decisions?
Yeah, wow. I know, right? That's great. Cool. Like I know you haven't had an experience yet with plant medicine, right?
No, I haven't. But I've read a few experiences that other people have had. It's similar to that too. And yeah, I have a cousin right now who's studying to be a psychotherapist, and he shared recently some information with me about psychedelics and some places to start with, like, just if you're curious. He had a few things to recommend on Netflix and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm very curious about it, and just like the experience. And I guess something that I'm kind of nervous of is more, I mentioned this to my cousin too, just like having a bad trip, and he was his response to me was that sometimes a bad trip is maybe labeled that, but in a sense it's kind of a necessary bad trip sometimes, because it's taking you back into something that, yeah, inside that you've either suppressed or don't want to look at, or but yeah, I don't know. I'm curious at the moment. I'm in just a place of like researching and kind of reading people's experiences and talking to people who have done it and who are experienced in it. And yeah, I'm definitely curious. So it's cool hearing your story and how it seems really like, yeah, incredible how it's sort of like a transcendent almost experience. But so healing too. Like there's so much in there that was, yeah, like addressed in that ceremony.
It was huge. And it was interesting because my very last point of that journey, which was my second night, it was me as a mother. And like my kids, oh, it makes me cry. My kids were in front of me. I didn't expect to cry on this podcast. My kids were in front of me, and I was given a torch. And this torch was so beautiful. It was like, you have the torch to lead your children. And yeah, it was just so powerful, because it was like, it doesn't matter how I was brought up. It doesn't matter people wanting to put me in a box and say, well, you were raised this way. Why do you not do that now? And it was a beautiful reminder that I am here to lead the way for my children in a way that I wasn't led. And it's not that my parents were bad or did anything wrong. They did what they knew. And I can validate that for sure. What I also know to be true for me is that there's a lot of generational patterns, chains, whatever you want to call it, that have been passed along from generation to generation. And I'm not interested in having those continue on with my children.
Yeah.
And so I'm the one that has been blessed with this opportunity to break those things. And it's not easy work. It's really hard. And I'm strong enough to do it. Nobody before me has been strong enough to be able to do it. And so I have been given the opportunity in this lifetime to do that. And I'm taking it on. And that's what that torch symbolized to me, was you're leading the way.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I know, right? So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and the fact that you wouldn't probably have had that experience without, either plant medicine and just, yeah, it's kind of having that deep knowing. Like I had one experience I think I've talked about before, with not plant stuff, but just the psychedelic. And I think that's right. MDMA and ketamine or whatever. Is that would be psychedelic? Or it'd be psychedelic, just not plant.
Yes.
which for me was just, there was like a deep knowing or almost like a trusting of my gut. Like, oh, the things that I have seen and I have witnessed and experienced that I was told didn't actually happen, or I saw them wrong, or I shouldn't be trusting what I mean, yeah, like in that I almost like re-witnessed myself going like, no, that's what that was. And I'm not wrong. And it's again, like it was like a trusting of what? Um, of myself, right? And not, I mean, like as I was just cautioning people, like not being or not feeling like they've been called into something. Because yeah, maybe you're not ready for the truth, or maybe like I found the moment that I took it was the right time. And maybe like how you're like, oh, I'm still in research stage. Like you should trust that maybe like it's not the right time, but when it is and it does present, like to not have fear around it, because it can really, I mean, it most likely will send you on a different trajectory of understanding, but it's beautiful. And like to hear, I mean, just thank you for sharing your like emotion with us, because it sounds so profound and helpful. And I mean, carrying a torch in like a very dark, I don't know, I would assume like a dark path forward, that you're the one going, you need so much courage and you need to so much trust in yourself, right? And that I'm like, good for you, because you've been that since maybe 11, since like you going like, nope, this is at YWAM, like that's supposed to be the light, but it's actually a lot of darkness and I have to go, and I'm going to trust that I have to move forward in that way. So like, amazing. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, how did you kind of like get into plant medicine, and what led you to that and to experimenting with this and experiencing it?
Well, it all started with weed.
Funny. How old were you with your first experience? Just like funny enough. 13. And then that again, like, I mean, I guess it's like, it's one thing for minors, like we'll go like, okay, like, when you're older, whatever. But funny that you're like this intuitive little like being. And then, okay, so
Oh yeah, that, and then it's interesting how you were in Tibet. Like I'm like these little, it's interesting.
Right? That's why I say like I don't regret anything that I've done, because it truly has been something that has led me to who I am today. And looking back, it's like I really feel like my purpose is just to be here to support and lead and guide other people to their own healing. And so that's why I'm like doing the missionary work, and doing YWAM and all of that. It's like the root of who I am was there. Yeah. It just was not in the way that was aligned for me. And so, the plant medicine stuff, I'd always smoked weed. And then I did stop for the rest of high school, obviously. And then I picked it back up in college. When I came back from YWAM, when I went to college.
What did you do in college, by the way?
I went to film school.
Oh, wow. Nice.
You're so cool.
And I remember I was in my I'll call it a rebellious stage, okay? But really what I do consider it is discovering me again. And I dabbled in a lot. I dabbled with a lot of MDMA, and it was fun for me. I dabbled with drinking, but my choice was MDMA because A, it was cheaper, and B, didn't get a hangover. And at least for me, I didn't. And so I did go down that road for quite a while. And then what? I had kids, but all that stopped, except for weed. Yeah. I still smoke weed. And then it wasn't till, I think it was last year, I was just feeling more called into working with plants. And I think it's because I was getting into the garden myself and learning how to garden. And and like this year I grew like a whole medicinal garden with like different flowers and stuff that I can make medicines out of, and tinctures and all of that. So I guess that's the witchy side of me. And I just had this idea of, because, you see psilocybin ceremonies and you see ayahuasca and you see even like in therapy, they're using MDMA and ketamine and like all of these different drugs. And I had a thought one day and I was like, why doesn't anybody do cannabis circles? And I was like, how could this work? So I approached one of my friends and I was like, hey, would you want to try this out with me and try a cannabis circle? And when I mean circle, it's people coming together and sitting in circle and, meditation and being intentional about what is it you're consuming. So it's just not going and like getting high and munching out.
Like for an escape versus like you're trying to use, just use it in a different way. Yes.
Yeah. So intentional. That's like, it has to be intentional. And so we started doing that and it blew my mind. The very first ceremony we had, we've done a bunch now. I actually have one coming up in a couple weeks, but it blew my mind the first time because we had people come that didn't consume. And I was like, what? You signed up for a ceremony where we smoke weed and you're not consuming? But they came because they wanted to heal their relationship with the plant and their mindset around the plant. It blew me away. And I'm not even joking you. Every single time we have a ceremony, we have at least one person that comes that doesn't consume. Every time. And I find that so cool.
Yeah, I feel like I'd be open to that. Me too. Just like coming to just like observe almost. And
well, and that you would be welcome because I would assume like maybe not everybody would feel comfortable like being would you call yourself a facilitator in that? Like, that you're also like, oh, I can learn, or just that you're intrigued or that it's not like an unwelcome thing. I love that.
Yeah, it was so cool. And we were like, oh, so because we ask everybody what their relationship with the plant is. And some of them are like, well, I grew up, my parents were stoners and I just didn't like it. And I felt XYZ. And so I'm here because I see how this can be medicine and I see how you can be intentional with it, but I'm not there yet. So I'm here to learn and I'm here to explore that side. And how healing is that? And what an example and leadership quality that is, and so responsible. And it was very cool. And so that's how my plant medicine ceremonies and stuff started. And then I love mushrooms as well. And so I have been somebody who likes to microdose, and I've tried a lot of different companies. And I recently came across a company, well, they found me, but a company that is from Calgary. They're called Zoom Garden. They're phenomenal. Like the quality is amazing. The purity is amazing. Sometimes you can get gut rot if you're eating psilocybin. This one doesn't because they support the psilocybin with functional mushrooms. So what I mean by that is like there's either reishi or chaga or ashwagandha in it, things like that will support you in your consumption,
like digestion, the gut wise and stuff.
The gut. But then there's like chaga energy. So there's different aspects to the other stuff, ingredients herbs that are in it. And so then, I started doing microdosing circles, and that's not to be mistaken for a macrodosing circle. Macrodosing is when you're taking more than 2 grams. Usually it's 3 to 5 for a macro dose, and that's when you're going to go to another planet. Microdosing, you do not. It's more there to, again, bring you in, drop you in deeper into your heart so that you can maybe access parts of you that have been pushed away that you don't want to remember, but they are being illuminated because it's time for you to remember.
Yeah. So what's some of like in these circles that you've had, are you kind of the one primarily like facilitating or do you do it like with someone else? I mean, it's a circle. So, but then if things come up for people, like how do they work through those?
Yeah. So I I've always done and always will, to be honest, collaborations with these plant ceremonies. I love collaboration in general, but I also love the support, and everybody has gifts, right? And everybody is attracted to somebody in some way for a reason you may or may not know. And so I just find it's helpful to have that support of that other person there as well. And then we just bounce off each other with what we're offering. So let's just say we're in a circle and I usually am the person that will lead the meditation aspect. And to toot my own horn for a sec, my meditations are pretty awesome.
I love meditation.
Yeah, because I do them a little bit different. My background, I was a spin instructor. Sure.
Oh, yes, that would definitely lend itself. Yeah.
And so the way that I do my meditations is kind of with beat-driven music. So it's not your typical like Zen sort of spa music. It's like there's beat to it and there's words to it and there's emotion to it, you know? And so that's what makes my meditation stand out a little bit more or differently, I should say. And so maybe I'm doing that, and then my co-facilitator, maybe they're going around and giving Reiki, or maybe they're using, like I use sound instruments as well. So chimes and drums and sound bowls and all of that.
Yeah. And just again, like I know we were just wondering, like Reiki and like sound, what do those sort of trigger for people?
Sound is frequency, and we all have different energy portals in us. It's just how we're made as humans. So you may know them as chakras. So you have your different chakra systems. So you have your root, which is at the base of your spine. And that's, if you're feeling like you're unbalanced, ungrounded, and like just life is chaotic, you need to root back down. So it's like rooting into Mother Earth, rooting back into where you feel stable again. So sound frequencies will activate and heal different energy points within you. They might clear out energy points within you. And Reiki is a universal energy that is comes through your hands. And so that, again, it will support you with maybe clearing out blockages, or maybe it's just making you feel relaxed and really deep rest. Because a lot of us are go, 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 and we're like constantly busy and going from one place to the next place. Like we're always on the move, and Reiki will just allow you to just relax, allow you to soften. There's tons of healing benefits to it as well. But yeah, emotional support is huge as well. So yeah, and the sounds sometimes will bring up memories as well for people. There's one girl that was in one of my ceremonies once, and I was I have little wind chimes, and I was doing wind chimes, and I go over each person with the wind chime because of, frequencies affect you, and you can feel it in your physical body. Same with the sound bowls. You can physically feel in your body, like different aspects of you that it's touching. And this one girl at the end, because I always have a open sharing circle, share your experience. It's never forced, but most people like to share. Yeah. And she was like, I had this memory of me as a little girl, and I was at my grandma's house, and those chimes reminded her of that, and it brought her through this process. And so it can be something as like subtle and big like that, or it can just be a point where it just feels nice. Yeah.
And again, as you're talking about all this, it's reminding me of your name, like Modern Hustle. Like again, you want to do these things intentionally, and even probably own the fact that you do lots of things, but you're trying to do them in a different way. Like you're bringing people through this series of kind of things or practices that maybe is a bit of a different way to define hustle, right? Like we're going to do them, we're going to get through them, but in a mindful and very intentional way. So cool. Yeah, I love that.
I feel like these circles as well, yeah, just like to take a break from the hustle, like to come and, yeah, I feel like even that we have to just be so intentional about these days, even to just prioritize that, like silencing ourselves and allowing someone to, yeah, just to subject yourself to that kind of like therapeutic, like healing. And yeah, it's cool.
It's interesting because even like in the context of like a day or a weekly rhythm, like typically church was that weekly rhythm for us, but so much of it busy, but also it's an othering experience. Like you're listening to somebody speak to you. And yes, there's a bit of that connection point with like, oh, I needed that remembering for this week. I needed to oh, that was a good word. But oftentimes it's a denial of self, or it's a prayer. There's not a lot of connection.
Yeah, I think it's on a very so you're encouraged to kind of like reflect but nothing is super embodied, I guess. Like it's not like,
Yeah, they're kind of like drawn into your concepts versus like this is what's really happening right here and now. This is my experience that's just uniquely mine, and I think that's what's really intriguing about the work that you do. It's like a personal but collective kind of work,
Yeah.
and you're really brought through the specifics of your life. Like for that girl hearing the wind chimes, that was like a memory just for her, and but then she also got to share it with people and find healing and be supported in that, which I think there's incredible value to that. Again, being brought back to ourselves and possibly finding the divine or like source or whatever within ourselves, which again, for just connecting the dots for people that are in the Christian context, just to kind of think about things in a different way. Like if as Christians, or people believe that, God can indwell and the Holy Spirit can indwell. This isn't such a foreign concept to that, right? Like we are supposed to like find times of prayer and solace and stuff. And so I don't think we need to be as afraid of like exploring things like this and trying to heal again, like not just praying. Again, prayer is great, but that's like you were really intentional about like the hustle is like an action. It's not manifesting and just hoping it happens, just like it's not praying and hoping that God fixes everything. It's like, what's the work that we have to do? And so like, thank you for doing that. Thank you for being brave to come on here and share your story. Like some of that was really like deep and I'm sure obviously not easy to have gone through, like a big. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like part of this as well is just one thing you were saying there was like people being maybe skeptical or whatever. I think it's tricky when your ideas about God, you've been taught to believe that they're right. And so, but I think part of the reality of this world is that we're all kind of here together and there are so many different ways people are connecting to God or to the divine. And I think it's, interesting when we refuse to kind of see some of those other ways that people are doing that. And that's just as valid and beautiful and powerful as like maybe those who would, claim Jesus is God and connect with that God and that works for them. It's powerful for them the same way that your experience with, your experience of the divine is powerful. So I don't know. I'm just like, I think it's beautiful to just hear all the different stories and ways of connecting.
I think one thing we forget as well is that we are all connected as human beings. We're all connected. So we can classify like coming to my ceremonies or my circles, whatever you want to call them. We can classify that as church if you want to.
Yeah.
The difference between the traditional church and then this sort of experience is that we are following through with supporting you in your personal healing. Like there was one girl it was two plant ceremonies ago from our cannabis circle, and she cracked open like no other. And she was sitting there in circle, and I just had this intuitive feeling, this nudge, this pull to her that I had to go to her. And I have a rattle. And I had an elder on Cortez make me, and I went and I just like was rattling off of her whole spine, her whole back. And I just kept rattling it. And what that was doing was breaking up energy that was stuck in her, that she was hysterical. She was crying. She had things she was processing. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew that she needed support in clearing out those blocks of whatever it is. And so that's what I did. And I just focused straight on her. My friend that was facilitating with me, she went around, was doing work with other people, like hands-on energy work with other people. And at the end of that circle, she told me that the girl that I was working on, she told me that she had these blocks that she felt like she had been holding on to for years that had finally released. And when I had come up to her and was like breaking up that energy around her, and it was just like something that she had never experienced before. Like she felt like something had physically left her body. And I was just like, wow, like, so that's the other thing is like, we're all connected. Like I was connected intuitively to her to work with her. I didn't know why. And I didn't know what it was. I just knew that's what I had to do. And then her sharing her experience after, and it was just like, whoa, like that's wild. So that's why I'm like, anything that I've experienced in life, I don't regret, because it's allowed me to be where I am today and to understand myself a little bit better as well.
Yeah.
Well, and to risk being misunderstood too. Like, I don't take that for granted. Like, really, like you are so brave and you are so strong to go out and to go, yeah, lots of people might not understand, but it's friggin' worth it when you see this thing go on with this woman, or even the change in your own life, or even the confidence that you have to lead your family. Like, all of those things are worth being misunderstood. But I don't also go like, it wasn't always easy, guaranteed, right? Like having to fight through, like, I'm going to believe in myself. I'm going to believe that this is my way forward, even though the pain, I'm sure, of some of that is palpable, right? Like, so thank you again. Like, it's really great to hear about like your story.
Especially when society puts you in this box, or wants to put you in this box, I should say, because I'm like, don't put me in that box. You tell me it's not possible, I will show you that it's possible, and I will do what I can to get there. And yeah, I know my parents are like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you're like, you were in sales.
Yeah.
And now you're doing what? And there isn't a lot of questions that's asked either. So I don't share info unless they share, because if you're not curious, then you're not going to be interested in what I have to say anyways. And I'll just continue what I'm doing. And then I got it from my husband too, up until literally probably 8 months ago. I finally feel like he believes in me now, and that he finally believes that what I'm doing is making a difference and bringing in money. Because society just wants you to make money.
Yeah.
So that's what they focus on.
And that you're not successful unless these metrics are sort of being met. So again, like, you're paving a new way, you're holding the torch, and not just for your kids, but even in sharing the story with us and our listeners. And yeah, like, truly thank you. Like, I know people can find you on Instagram, right? Do you want to tell us some of like the ways that people can contact you? I know you are doing a ceremony this weekend, like it's not a retreat, it's a ceremony. Yeah, but you come to Vancouver a lot. So just tell people how they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at themodernhustle.ca. That's where I post mostly everything. I do not have a website. And yet, yeah, I will. Well, I will have a website because I have a cacao company as well, and so, which is a form of plant medicine. And so I'll have a website at some point, but that's where you can find me. And I post like all of my stuff for where I am, what I'm doing. And I will say as well that not all of my ceremonies are plant related. That will make you out of body experience. Cacao is not out of body. It is simply, to say it really simply, it's just a heart opener. It's allow you to drop in deeper into your heart. And so it's essentially chocolate. It's just the purest form of chocolate you can get. And it's really beautiful to even just sit in your own prayer, your own ritual, whatever you do every day, just allowing yourself to center, to ground in, to connect into your heart. That's really all that cacao does. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and people can, like, again, we always want to cultivate asking questions and being curious. And I mean a really non-invasive way. They can go on your Instagram and be curious and just look through your stuff, or feel free to DM with any questions. I guarantee you, like, if you're coming from a place, or even possibly a judgmental place or whatever, I'm sure, like, even just the questions we've asked you today, you're very open, and thank you for just your honesty and transparency.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks again. And yeah, check her out, you guys.
Definitely.
Yeah.
This is a great conversation. Yeah.
We could go on forever. Like, there's so much I haven't shared.
Okay, part 2. It's coming.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, thanks for being here. See you next week. Bye.